Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Joy and Gratitude with my wonderful host, Ms. Beth Mercurio. Beth, haven't seen you in a little bit.
I
Tell
know,
me, what's up?
Neo. What's up? Well, things are great. I love that question. I will be honest. I am feeling energized. I am feeling healthy again. I am feeling grateful for just sunshine and some ability to just have slow paced living in my life, which is kind of what I wanted to talk about today, if that works for you. This idea of how so often we are always asking people what they're doing. Like, oh, what are you doing? Where are you going? What's next? What's your plan? And today, my daughter was racing off to work and she said, what's the plan tonight? What's the plan for tonight? And she could see and she knew that I was coming off a weekend that was really full and there was not a lot of rest and not a lot of rejuvenation. And here we were going into the work week, not feeling rejuvenated, not really having downtime. And I looked at her and she said, "Oh, is the plan to have no plan?" And I was like, "Exactly. I don't know the plan and I don't want to have a plan. I just want to know that I don't have to plan tonight and it will be whatever it is, but can it just not be planned?" And so I kind of wanted to talk about over planning and this inability to just say, I did nothing. I don't want to do anything this weekend. I'm going to have a weekend where I don't have a plan. I don't have to see people. There's no trip, there's no destination. I'm just going to be, because I think this doing, we talk about human beings versus human doings. And what if our dialogue switched more to just the being part? Imagine.
What a great topic. I I always there is something about me that every Friday when I'm on business calls and people ask that question, "So, what are you gonna do this weekend?"
Yes.
My heart starts pounding. And I have more weekends that I use it as my source of rejuvenation and regulating than I have activities. And if I do have an activity, it's an adventure, laissez-faire. We make it up as we go along. We don't plan it. And it's almost as you are not living, quote unquote, if you don't have
Mm,
this planned schedule. And it's
yes.
interesting because I think it has a lot to do also with generations. So, when you're young, you live for the week. It's all about the weekend, especially during the holidays, during the summer. It's all about, yay, I'm going to go do something over the weekend. And then when you get into your 30s, a lot of us have children at that time.
Hmm.
So we are full of activities, whether it's soccer, whether it's baseball, whether it's football. So we're full of those activities all the way into our 40s and early 50s. And then in your 50s, you're getting to that point that you're planning for the empty nest. So you start doing your personal adventures and digging into hobbies and those type of things. But we all forget that we have to basically slow down. Just identify who we are, replenish. And sometimes the joy of being in that party or being at the museum and being at the game is equal to the joy of being on the couch with a good book and a blanket. And I'm the type of person that I'm on the couch with the good book and the blanket more than I am the one that's outside, in all those activities. So, yes, yes, you do not need to be in the competition or be in that quote unquote rat race of creating activities to be accepted or to be part of the group.
Yeah. And I think it's also this realization because it's hard because I do think this external pressure, we talk about that, but when the question is what are you doing this weekend? You it's almost like there's an underlying sort of implication that you should be doing something.
Yeah.
Instead of like, imagine if somebody just said, "How are you gonna be this weekend?" Be like, "Oh, what is," I mean, literally, "How are you gonna be?" Like, "Oh, I don't know. I haven't really thought about it." Or I think it would change the question, whereas I think you automatically get into a less than when somebody's telling you what trip they're doing and asking you what vacation you have planned or where are you going or what are you doing or how, and you just kind of get caught up in this. And I think similarly you mentioned the different phases of life. I still believe like in every phase we're becoming more and more like overactivitied. And I had a funny conversation the other day with somebody, and we always weave in things as appropriate, but like technology becoming a real issue for all of us. And so this idea of technology and this more that there's this dopamine kick and we're always needing to be doing something and we're always sort of distracted. We talk about being present versus distracted. It's that same idea of rest and rejuvenation and slowing down. And in some ways, I have a lot of friends that are doing, family and friends that are doing the New York Times puzzles, right? Connections and strands and Wordle and the mini crossword. And there's kind of a social aspect to that. People are sharing their results. And I was never really into it, but then I thought, well, maybe it's not a bad idea to wake up and at some point do a little brain teaser. And so for me, I fell in love with connections. Just like I love words. It felt like the right one for me. And then I started to get into strands, which I love. And the other night, I had this funny moment that I will share with you where I started strands in the morning. And for those of you that don't know strands, it's like a word puzzle, and you try to find all the words, and there's a theme that you're trying to find. And it's old school. I mean, in some ways, it's fun. It makes you feel like a little bit of a kid. You're playing
Yeah.
that kind of a game. So, but I found like one of the big hard themes that which in the game is called the spanagram for those of you that play it early. And I got so excited. But then I really struggled with the puzzle and I couldn't find all the other words that sort of matched this theme. And it was like 10 o'clock at night. And I thought, oh, I have to finish strands because the next day is a new puzzle.
Right.
So I knew like if I didn't finish the puzzle, I would never finish the puzzle. And then I went, what am I doing? Like, this is supposed to be fun. This was supposed to be something that just made my brain think. And now I've created a scenario where I'm not going to bed until I finish something. It's now become pressure. And I had a moment where I went, oh my gosh, this restful, rejuvenating brain teaser has become yet again something like achiever must complete pressure. I was proud of myself because I caught myself and went, this is crazy. You're not resting and going to sleep because you feel like you need to complete a puzzle. And I swiped out and I did not finish the puzzle. And I've been talking to more and more people about how those puzzles do become somewhat addictive. And the purpose of them initially, which is to kind of give us a time to, because sometimes they take, you know, 20 minutes, or it gets you out of the rat race because you're focused in a way that's different. So in some ways it feels rejuvenating, but in other ways is it still like feeding right into this overactivity, do instead of just being, where you aren't doing anything that is keeping you in that more, rush, run, do pressure, like external pressure to be keeping doing and be instead of just being and sitting on the couch, like you said.
It's kind of interesting because just recently I started really getting into human design.
Mm.
And, human design is when you start understanding that humans are created in five different uh, types. Um, the first type is the generative type. And these are people that are the builders. These are the skilled people that they're very task oriented. And that's about 36% of the population worldwide, and that's what they do. And then you have the manifesting generator, and these are the ones that are critical thinkers but they're still builders, and that's about 32%. And they are always seeking the puzzle. They are always seeking to create, but they must finish it because otherwise they don't feel fulfilled. Then you have the third group, which is about 20% of the population, and they call them the projectors. And I find myself in that group based on going through the process of identifying which group you go into. And they are more of advisors, and they are the type of people that are guides, and they're big observers. So I find myself able to be in empty space because I'm comfortable there. I actually do really well there, and not have to produce. Yet, when I need to produce, I go into production mode. So that's the projector. And then the next one is only 9% of the population, and that is the true manifester. These are your entrepreneur visionary people, the Einsteins of the world, that come up with a vision and they basically share and inform that vision, and they know how to pull the other types together to make that vision happen. And the last is only 1%. Oh, by the way, the manifestors are only 9%.
Okay.
The last percent is only 1%, and those are the reflectors. And the reflectors reflect a mirror on society. They are extremely emotional people. They are people that actually feel more than all of us. And
Mm.
they literally will reflect your energy and make you be aware of who you are. So, why did I bring all this up? I brought it up because that's why it's so hard to slow down.
Mm.
Because if you notice, it's only 1% that naturally are able to view the world in its totality. Only 1%. And then the rest of us are on a treadmill, more than others, right?
Mhm.
Some, but we are on a treadmill. And we all are trying to establish, create, make it happen. So even when we say, I have a hobby, the hobby starts taking over. I like to exercise. The exercise starts taking over. But if we start taking the time to schedule time for ourselves,
Mm.
to schedule time for the pause that we talk about so much. But you see, for us in human design, in the world, we as human beings are not created to pause. We have to intentionally pause. And that's what takes us to our goals, to our purpose, to our everything. But it has to be
Mm.
an intentional choice. We were made to make the intentional choice to pause and to literally stay in that space, stay in that empty space, and be grateful and find your joy in you. And be, you see, when you get to the point that you find joy in just being,
Mm.
you don't have to perform. And then when you do perform, you're performing intentionally. You're performing with that joy that you build up that you want to give as your purpose.
Wow. There's so much insight in what you said, and I love the chat about human design, and I'm pretty sure I have to go now. You're going to get me to go look back. I did it a while ago, and I'm pretty sure I'm just a straight up generator, which will not surprise a lot of people. And I love it because the reason it was resurrected for me was this idea that we are so different, and that as a parent, understanding what my children are could shift how I parent, because I keep assuming they're like me. Wasn't everybody a generator? Isn't that you just, often my children will say, like, I sort of believe you can do anything. I mean, if maybe not, maybe it's a circuitous route, maybe it's not direct, it's not linear, it doesn't look like anybody else's. But if you really want to do something, I sort of feel like you can. You just got to go after it and figure it out. But that's because of who I am, and for me to assume that they can do that just as easily, that that's how they get motivated, that that's what they do, that's a little bit. short-sighted because that's we're not all created the same way. So I love this idea of reminding ourselves that we are all different, understanding that a majority of us have that drive in some way. Yep,
Yeah.
that can we can turn it on, and some of us are in it all the time. And but yes, that just because that's how we are innately designed, or how we can easily flip to that if we need to. Similarly, we can also choose to not do that and to allow ourselves to, and we've talked about this a lot, but to meditate, to be mindful. I mentioned at the beginning of this episode that I feel healthy, and you were seeing sort of my gratitude around having my health back because I hadn't been healthy, and I was really reminded how much that can impact how you show up. And a lot of our listeners, Neo, have heard about your struggles with health and how much it can impact your life and how you show up. And I love the idea that when I wasn't healthy, I had to nap
Yeah.
every day. Every day I would not make it through the day without sleeping. And I remember really struggling with that at first because, again, for whatever reason, napping wasn't like, what do you mean you have to nap? And is that okay? And I realized that I really struggled with that initially. It was like, you can't nap at 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Like, you got to be doing something. You're not working, you're not talking to a client. Like, what are you doing? And honestly, it was such a beautiful lesson because while I needed to rest, I really was forced to listen to my body. And it was a body nap, just to be clear. This
Mhm.
wasn't like, oh, I think I'm tired. This was like my whole body was like, I cannot function. I need to lie down. And then I would sleep. So it was true. Like when I listened to my body, it was telling me I need to lie down and get rest. And it was only, I set my alarm. So it wasn't like I was going to sleep for 5 hours. I slept for 25 minutes and I was rejuvenated. And so I would love to talk a little bit about, because now I love it. And now, even though I'm healthy, if I get that little bit of a sense, and obviously not all of us can take naps at all times. I mean, I laugh. I know there are pods now in different corporate settings. Like people are realizing that rejuvenation and rest is really important. They're creating places for people to have some rest and sleep and rejuvenation. We can't always do that. There's many moments we need to push through. But if there is a moment where you don't have to push through, what's the story that you're telling yourself that's disallowing you to intentionally choose rest, choose rejuvenation, choose something that's atypical from the race that we're used to or accustomed to, that actually gives you more energy, more productivity, and allows you to get back to what you mentioned, an ability to focus on purpose, on joy, and really show up as yourself. So maybe we could talk a little bit about, and I do, as we always say, we've talked about human design, how each person is different. We each have our own personal ways to rejuvenate. But what Neo is some of the things that come up for you when you think about being intentional around rest or rejuvenation or tending to your own, physical needs and slowing down?
I um, have to confess that I am terrible at it. I'm horrible.
Mm,
So for me, it has to be intentional. And for me, it means I schedule time. I've gotten into the habit to put an hour in my calendar that the topic is me.
mm,
And in that hour, sometimes I get in the car and I go for a ride. Sometimes I just go for a walk. Um, I have a fun new car, so I love it. Uh, but anyway, um, but sometimes I just read. Sometimes I take a nap. I let my
mm.
body tell me what's right for that day. And I don't have an agenda. I want it to be just refresh space. And that's what works for me. But I have to be intentional because my whole life I have been such an A type personality that the idea of rest was weakness.
Yes.
And now the idea of rest is power.
Oh,
So that was something that it took basically me being depleted in order to identify that that's what I needed as an individual. And this is very personal. Everybody's different. But for me, that idea of rest and the hour changes depending on what's going on in that schedule that day, but the hour's always there.
Mm.
And I also listen to my body when it says enough. You know, when you have that day that you're working, 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 and you start actually not being productive because you're exhausted.
I do.
I have started saying, "You know what? I'm stopping at this point. I'll pick it up in the morning." And then when I pick it up in the morning, I get whatever it is that didn't get done, done in minutes
Yes.
compared to when I was fighting myself to try to get it done. So that's the way I'm operating. That's where I'm in my space right now. Um, but I gotta tell you all, it's difficult. It is a fight every single day because that 8 type personality, it is hard to fight that legacy. It really
Yes.
is. It's
It
painful.
is painful to fight the legacy. And I'm going to add this idea around I love the intentionality of scheduling it into your calendar. I also love us modeling and trying to continue to model for the people in our lives and our community, listening to what our needs are. Because I think this idea of overriding rest or overriding what you need to rejuvenate, what you need to be more productive, can sometimes, when we truly are in flow, that may mean that we need to say no to something that we put in place. And I know for me, you talked about your legacy achievership, my legacy of people pleasing and not wanting to disappoint. Well, now I'm also trying to be in the practice of if I set up a meeting, and obviously I'm not talking about a work meeting, but if you set up something that you thought was going to be rejuvenating, whether it be a visit to your parents or going to meet a friend, or, and this is specifically, this is on the weekend, doesn't have to be during the week, whatever it was that you at the time thought would feel really good. If you know it's not going to feel good, like you're overriding the fact that maybe what you really need is solo time, you don't want social time, if something has shifted, it would be lovely for us to model us going, hey, what? Hey, guess what? Something is shifting for me. I hate to do this, but I'm going to need to reschedule and need to tend to some personal space and time. If that could become more of the norm, because I think right
Mm.
now it feels like, for if you said that somebody might be like, what? Like, we had a plan. Like, I'm not, how can you do that to me? Now I don't have but if you were sort of like, hey, you know what? It's way more important. Like, I'm so happy that Neo said that because she's not overriding her needs. And the reality is, when we get together and it works for both of us, then wow, just like it was the way you described your morning being that much more productive and getting it done quick, that's how that social interaction will feel. Versus if you go somewhere and you really don't want to be there, not because of the person, but just because you're physically not in that space. Uh, I think that could be amazing. It's super hard and I'm challenged by it right now because I don't like letting people down. And so sometimes I still override and show up for the walk or the conversation. And sometimes obviously it turns out great. You think you want something and it ends up still being wonderful. But being in a practice of listening and saying, hey, are there people that you can start to practice not overriding something and saying, can we reschedule? If the person says, no, I have time for 3 weeks, maybe you say, okay, I still want to go. But
Right.
be in the practice of asking for what you need and seeing if there's a way to incorporate your own need for rest, your own moving and shifting definition of rejuvenation, because that's the other thing. It's not always the same. Sometimes you want people to feel rejuvenated. Sometimes you want solo time to feel rejuvenated. I know my husband, I giggle because his rejuvenation is doing things that for me feel like tasks like I never want to do. He loves to weed. It took me forever to be like, how is weeding rejuvenating? But there it was. That's me projecting that that's not something that's rejuvenating. But for him, being out in nature, using his hands, not being around anybody, having nobody need him, being in his own space and his own thoughts is highly rejuvenating. So now when he's like, I have to weed, in my mind, I sort of have shifted and I'm like, oh, he wants to weed. So
Yeah.
even though it sounds like a have to, it really is something that's feeding his ability to be out and do something for a while that is quiet. And so knowing that about yourself, knowing what it is that rejuvenates you, owning that, and then maybe practicing not overriding when that shifts or that changes or something comes up for you, and allowing people to maybe meet you there. And I think the more we do it, the more people will meet you there. And you go like, "Hey, no big deal. Of course we can reschedule." So that we're feeding each other's kind of truthful, authentic listening to what they need. I would love more of that for each other. And I'm in a practice of it. It's still really hard for me, if I set up something and then I say, "Oh, I can't really do that," or "I don't feel like running. Could we walk?" Or, "What is it that I need?" Or, "I actually can't go today," or whatever it looks like. How can we practice really listening to what we need?
Yeah, it's kind of funny. I had a dinner last week that I was supposed to go to, and it was, it was a social thing, but also could have turned into a business thing. And that particular day, I had been running hard since like 4 o'clock in the morning.
Mm,
I, I had to work on something, and I had been just going, going, going. And it came to the time, to a few hours before the dinner, and I just had to call, and I just said, "I'm sorry, I can't do this." Um, and what was really nice was how gracious they were, and how, "Oh, we're gonna be at such and such together, in a few months. Let's grab dinner then."
mm,
And that just felt so wonderful to be seen, to, have the flexibility. I mean, there were multiple people. This was a large dinner, so one person wasn't gonna destroy the event. But it didn't matter. It could have been completely different. And that's what I think you're talking about, is
yes.
understanding that sometimes things are just not at a level that that person's going to be able to show up fully, and giving them the space to come back when they're gonna be 100%. And that's what that group did for me, and I was so grateful about it.
Mm,
And then there was a post about the dinner, and, I responded to the post, and they were just so kind about, "We missed you, but, so glad that you saw us, blah, blah, blah." It was just a really special moment, and this is a group that I look forward to
mm,
seeing in a few months,
yes.
because of the kindness they bestowed on me. So it's really about leading in with kindness and understanding that we
Mhm.
are not all there every single day, but I want you to be there when you're present, not when you're
Yes.
obligated. There's a difference.
There's a difference. And each of us needs rest and rejuvenation at different times. And what role can we play in supporting people's needs? So again, I go back to that article in the New York Times that I read that prompted this conversation. And it was us asking, "What are you doing this weekend? What trip do you have planned?" What blah, blah, blah. That is doubling down. And how do we just say, "How do you plan to be this weekend? What are you gonna do for downtime?" I mean, can we even ask that straight up? Like, "Oh, or maybe lead by example. Again, I cannot wait to lie around and be in my bed until no alarm goes off and I sleep in, and then maybe I'll figure out if I want to go out that day or not." Or lead with sort of the permission to allow ourselves to be resting, to be rejuvenating in different ways. Like we can do that too by the questions that we ask. That was my big takeaway. Oh my gosh, we all ask these questions that perpetuate this busy world
Mhm.
instead of supporting and celebrating the rest and the rejuvenation. And can we shift that? And can we shift it by one, not overriding, which you did beautifully for that dinner, go you. And two, by if you are on the receiving end of that, by showing kindness and compassion and maybe celebrating that person's ability to listen to what they need so that they can show up as the human that they want to be in the moment that they're with you. I think that's something I want to strive for because I think it could be really beautiful if we all just it allows us to be more authentically ourselves and not always pushing through and not pretending that we have more energy than we have. And so I think you and I are really good at it. I think we hold each other to that. If there's a reason why one of us can't show up, we say it. So we can maybe use ourselves as good examples to continue to stay present and allow other people to be whatever they are, whenever they are, and accept them for that. And that doesn't mean we don't have a disappointment every once in a while. If we were excited to see someone, that's okay too. We're not trying to say, it's all going to be glorious and wonderful, but I think we need to stay in it together.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think, when you think of this, you think of summertime, you think of holidays,
Mm,
how nice they would all be if we were welcome to the person at their best. And we made it so that it would be an open space for people to really bring their best to the game instead of having to perform
mm,
and move out of the performance. So when I think of the joy song for this episode, everything that we talked about just rang in my head, one particular song, and that's Summertime by DJ Jazzy Jeff and, of course, Will Smith, and how that song was all about getting all mustered up, getting all energized. And it's impossible not to dance to that song when you hear it, but it was all about the activity and the strength in the activity that we had to do because of the season. And that is true whether it's the holiday season, whether it's Passover, whether it's any time, but summertime is a good reflection of the get up and go to be seen and not to truly reflect on what you need.
mm.
So let's see what the gratitude rocks have to say.
Let's see. I love that. Okay. Here we are. Oh, Neo. Today, for those that can't see, I'm holding a beautiful blue rock, and the rock is joy. Which is how Neo and I connected. We did this together, and I chose joy. So, here, this is the first time I think that this has come up for us again since that incredible electric moment. So, I think it's beautiful because, again, it goes to our being able, when we are present, when we do not override, we are allowing ourselves to tap into more joyful moments. We are intentionally providing spaciousness for joy to be present. When we are performing, as Neo said, when we are showing up having overridden something like I need rest or I'm not really up for this, then I think we hinder our ability to truly experience joy. And so I think this whole episode has been really around listening to ourselves, being present, not overriding, and showing compassion and kindness when others around us also are trying to set up a scenario for more joy for themselves and thereby extended to us. Yeah, I love this one today.
Beautifully said. Oh, there's nothing more special than when we listen to our body, listen to our heart, listen to our space, and just enjoy the joy, the gratitude. And with that, thank you all for coming on this ride with us and living your beautiful flow. Till next time.